Ahoy, folks! I hope you've been studying your bending, because the fate of the world rests on your shoulders today. Well, okay, it's not that serious, but the fate of today's entertainment relies on you and me ranking the 8 known avatars from the Avatar, The Last Airbender, and The Legend of Korra series. What we'll do is simple. I'll cover some background of the Avatar, taking into consideration their skills, circumstances, achievements, zodiac signs, well, not the last one, but if I find out any of them are Geminis, then they're automatically at the bottom of the list. Then I'll rank them, 1 being the best, and 8 being, are you serious? My Uncle Bob could do that. Well, all jokes aside, these guys are all pretty solid, and I really don't think my Uncle Bob is better than any of them, but don't tell him I said that. However, for the sake of the art of ranking things, and because I like stirring the pot, it has to be done. Now that we've covered everything, let's get started, shall we? Well, here we go. Somebody has to take the number 8 spot, so it might as well be Avatar Zetto. Zetto started his life during a time of uncertainty and strife within a suffering Fire Nation. Unlike the other avatars, Zetto didn't rely on his powers to restore balance to his homeland. Instead, he worked tirelessly as a public servant by working within the Fire Nation's government. He began at the bottom and worked his way up to the top by proving his diligence and loyalty to policy within the Fire Nation. His work as a humble bureaucrat allowed him to give back to his home and rebuild the once great empire he knew and loved. He was also the first character known to be able to lava bend, so he's got that going for him. Other than that, there is not much else known about Zetto. Now, don't get me wrong, this man sounds absolutely lovely. Truly, he sounds like a guy I'd vote for in my local elections. But setting aside his acts of public service, there just wasn't really that much that wowed me, you know? He may be able to scorch my skin off pretty easily, but still, compared to the rest of today's contenders, there's a little to be desired. Next up, at number 7, we have Avatar Karuk. The Water Tribe Avatar Karuk worked diligently to do the best he could, but unfortunately, he wasn't very good at his job of being the Avatar.
I was always a go-with-the-flow kind of Avatar.
He dealt with a troubling sickness brought onto him by an encounter with a dark spirit. Throughout his life, Karuk focused much of his energy fighting spiritual battles with these dark entities in order to prevent more of them from breeding and potentially harming anyone else. He spent so much time dedicated to these battles that he actually began to spend less time focusing on his duties as an avatar. And as the sole person chosen to maintain peace of the world, that's a big no-no. On top of the illness destroying him from the inside out, man's also lost his fiancée to Ko, the face stealer. You remember that guy? The big scary centipede-looking horror fiasco? Yeah, him. Side note, Ko was definitely way too scary to put in a kid's show. I still get nightmares to this day about him, and I'm a tax-paying adult. Anyway, we can all agree that Karuk kinda had it rough. He ended up dying at a pretty young age from the spiritual illness finally destroying his body, and probably grief as well. Because he was preoccupied with his own baggage, however, the world suffered tremendously after his death. All this due to his lack of attentiveness to the issues plaguing the nations while he was alive and capable of fixing them. I don't know. Pretty crummy work, I can't lie. But, alright, listen, I have nothing against the guy for being bad at his job. Heck, I'm bad at my job 99% of the time. But again, when I'm bad at my job, it doesn't affect the state of the entire world. So I expect my man to have just a little more sense of urgency for the sake of the world, you know? Ranking above old Karuk is Avatar Yang Chen. Yang Chen is the only other air nomad avatar that we get to learn about in greater detail besides our leading man Aang. If you compare the two, you will find that while they both were raised with the same ideals, their personalities and actions as the Avatar are starkly different. This isn't to say that Yang Chen was violent in any way. Her strong-willed dedication to peace actually won her much admiration throughout the nations, and she was even worshipped as a deity by some Earth Kingdom residents after her passing. Her approach to peace was much more tactical.
Selfless duty calls you to sacrifice your own spiritual needs.
She was willing to use unconventional and less ethical methods to obtain it, like manipulation and deceit. However, she approached it in this way due to her understanding of the tangled and complicated political relationships between the 4 nations. She did such a good job at bringing peace between the nations that there were no acts of war for an extremely long long stretch of time after her death. However, when conflicts arose between humans and spirits, Yang Chen frequently took the side of humans, overlooking when they were in the wrong and violating spiritual treaties and causing destruction to the world. Because of this, there was an uptick in spirits turning dark due to humans destroying heavily spiritual places like forests. Remember Heibai? Which subsequently led to an uptick in dark spirit presence in the world that Avatar Karuk had to face, and eventually fell from. Honestly, I can vibe with a lady who takes gatekeep, gaslight, and girl boss seriously. So, she has my utmost respect. For number 5, we have Avatar Wan. You already know we've got to cover the OG Avatar. Wan, he is the man who started it all, initially receiving the power of firebending from the Fire Lion Turtle, and then quickly gets into trouble and gets banished to the spirit world. Talk about fumbling the bag. Though initially getting off on the wrong foot with the spirits, an act of bravery and kindness exhibited by Wan wins over the spirit Ai, and he gains their favor. Wan realizes that he much prefers the spirit world to the human world and decides to live life like the spirits and protect them. Through continuous training, Wan honed his bending skills to something beyond him, and during a fierce battle with a dark spirit, merges with the spirit Rava permanently and creates the Avatar state, where he finds a source of power unlike anything he had experienced before. He began to use his new power to bridge the gap between the human world and the spirit world, while simultaneously making sure humans understood to respect the spirits and their sacred areas. However, he was just one man, and as he was dying, Wan was not completely satisfied with the state of the world, as he still saw violence and darkness present. Rava assured him that their journey was not over, and would continue every time they were reincarnated.
There wasn't enough time.
Don't worry. We will be together for all of your lifetimes.
Which began the Avatar cycle. Though he didn't completely rid the world of darkness like he intended, hey, I love the ambition, man. Wan's determination was so strong that it began the start of creating the most powerful entity the world has ever seen, which bled over into hundreds of lifetimes, which, hey, can you say you've done that? Probably not. Probably. Alrighty, we've made it into the top 4. Now, what are we thinking? How are we feeling? I think the list so far shouldn't have made anyone too upset. But before I continue, I just want to say, I hope we can all be civil and remain friends by the end of this video. Now that I've got that out of the way, our number 4 spot belongs to our very own Avatar Koshi. Koshi was born as an earthbender and wields a unique and unyielding personality that makes her stand out from the other avatars on this list. She was born from parents who came from criminal backgrounds and were not highly regarded. After being abandoned, she was later adopted by a man named Sang, who attempted to raise her as his own. Her upbringing was anything but easy, and on top of that, she wasn't even acknowledged as the Avatar until later in life, which was not received well by those around her. In an attempt to regain her safety and take revenge on those who were out to get her, Koshi fled and joined the Flying Opera Company, which had close ties to her birth parents. With her new crew by her side, she made most of her moves in the shadows and the, shadier parts of the criminal underworld. She made a few enemies along the way, and we learn of some of them in the episode Avatar Day in Season 2 of Avatar: The Last Airbender. We learn that Koshi is responsible for the death of Chen, the Conqueror, and it's revealed that Koshi managed to take him and his army single-handedly by using her airbending to separate the peninsula which they were standing on from the mainland. Chen ended up falling to his death, thus leading her to be accused of his murder by the angry townspeople of an Earth Kingdom village in the future. After the truth is revealed about Kyoshi's noble intentions, she is forgiven. She also formed Kyoshi Island and founded the Kyoshi Warriors, who we all know and love, to keep the land safe. Her policies helped turn the Earth Kingdom into a constitutional monarchy, and she continued her work by forming the Dai Li, which we later see unfortunately becomes severely twisted and corrupt. Well, we can't win them all. It's the thought that counts. Number 3 spot belongs to Avatar Korra. Alright, I know my girl Kora has some haters out there, but don't act like you wouldn't be at least a little cocky if you woke up one day and suddenly realized you were the reincarnation of the greatest hero humanity had ever seen. Not only does she absolutely rock the very deserved confidence of the Avatar, but with the spirit of Aang's assistance, she successfully hones and masters the skill of energy bending, which we'll get into later when we talk about Aang, which was basically unheard of at the time, completely expanding the world of bending. Plus, she's mentored by Katara herself, so you already know she's a real G.
What's the point? We've been at this for almost 6 months, and I can barely take a couple of steps without collapsing.
Skill aside, Korra also goes through some dark stuff, and is left subsequently traumatized for some time. But her strength and recovery from the obstacles she faced shows an unshakable perseverance that I think she doesn't get enough credit for. Enough said. Ladies and gentlemen, our runner-up today belongs to none other than the Cabbage Merchant!
My cabbages!
Oh, sorry. My bad. This one got confused with my other list. Anyway, our real runner-up is undeniably Avatar Roku. Roku's character is interesting and layered within the current conflict we are presented at the beginning of the Avatar franchise. Initially, our only exposure to the Fire Nation at that point had been through the negative connotation from the character's perspectives. But when we meet Roku through Aang's visions, we are exposed to a new, more humane side to the seemingly barbaric Fire Nation citizens. Throughout the series, Aang also interacts with Roku's spirit the most, more than likely because he was his predecessor. So we get a lot more face-to-face action and information, unlike the other past Avatar lives, which are mainly shown through smaller snippets and heavily buried lore.
It was bitter work, but the results were worth it.
Roku reigned as the Avatar during a tense period preceding the violent 100-year war that was adopted within Aang's lifetime. In Season 3, Episode 6, titled The Avatar and the Fire Lord, Roku's past is revealed through a spiritual dream by Aang. There, we truly get to experience the Avatar's early childhood and past. Roku was born of a higher nobility, and because of this, was able to form a close bond with Sozin, who was next in line to become the Fire Lord. In the early years of his life, Roku and the rest of the nations lived in a prolonged time of peace due to Kyoshi's legacy, but once he began his training as the Avatar, conflict within the nations soon began to pick up. As adults, Sozin was crowned as the Fire Lord, and Roku became a fully realized Avatar. Initially, the two remained close, and were able to work side by side, Sozin gracefully accepting Roku's advisings on leading the Fire Nation. However, conflict soon arose between the pair when Sozin revealed his plan to grow Fire Nation territory beyond the borders and expand the empire. Roku was strictly against the idea, insisting that the nations should undoubtedly remain separate. That was the last of that conversation, until years later, when Roku discovered that Sozin had begun moving forward with his plot despite his warnings. When Roku attempts to confront Sozin, a fight breaks out between the two, and Roku ends up sparing Sozin's life because of their history together. Many years later, a giant volcanic eruption begins to consume the island that Roku lived on. Sozin sees the flames from his island and decides to assist his old friend. After a hard-fought battle, the two begin to make their escape from the island, but Roku collapses after inhaling too much of the poisonous gas from the magma. Sozin begins to reach out to help, but quickly realizes that without Roku being alive, his plans of further domination were much more attainable, and ultimately decides to betray his best friend and leave him to die. Now, why did I basically give you this guy's whole life story? Well, I feel like it truly shows the strength of his character in a time where it could have been easier to side with his childhood friend and succumb to blind nationalism. Roku was the true example of what an Avatar should encompass: kind, loyal, but able to make sacrifices for the greater good. He obviously cared about the well-being and peace of all the nations, and died a noble death in an attempt to help others. Even after his unfortunate end, Roku's spirit did everything he could to be the strongest mentor to Aang when he had no one else to turn to for guidance on how to be the Avatar. Maybe I'm biased because Roku had the most exposure of all the Avatar spirits, but I truly think he was the most helpful to Aang even after his death, and it would be just plain incorrect not to give him partial credit for also ending the war by his side. And finally, a surprise to absolutely no one, either because you agree with me or because you understand the process of elimination. Either way, congrats. Our #1 Avatar of all time is, drumroll please, Avatar Aang! I think that there is a general consensus that of all the avatars, Aang's story of struggle and eventual victory is the most impressive and touching by far. Unlike the other avatars, Aang was informed of his special identity much earlier than usual, causing him to lose a part of his childhood to the responsibilities, duties, and expectations that come with assuming the role of the avatar. Poor guy just wanted to play airball with his friends, not be expected to achieve world peace. Then, after he attempts to flee out of fear, he crashes face first into the ocean and then wakes up 100 years later and finds his entire kind wiped off from the face of the earth. How a 12-year-old boy even recovered from that is beyond me. Not only did he manage to survive, Aang had to learn all of the remaining elements within the span of a year. So, unlike all the other avatars who had the luxury of training their entire lives, Aang did the damn thing with a fraction of the time while also inheriting the issues of a 100-year-long war between the nations. Because of this war, finding open and willing teachers was nearly impossible, but Aang traveled the entire world to find a suitable teacher for himself in order to save the world. Then, when the big moment finally came, this literal child managed to overthrow Fire Lord Ozai.
You and your forefathers have devastated the balance of this world, and now you shall pay the ultimate price!
Who was leading the most powerful military force in the entire world while there was a comet occurring that made Ozai's powers 100 times stronger than usual. Oh, you thought I was finished? Then he proceeds to not only continue to stay true to his morals as an air nomad and in the conflict without killing Ozai, but peacefully, well, sort of peacefully, Ozai did get his butt absolutely whooped, but peacefully managed to just take away Ozai's ability to bend. Hello? Like, I didn't even know that was possible. But yeah, the youngest avatar that we know of having to beat every single odd stacked against him to save the world from a power-hungry regime, and doing it with grace, and successfully restoring peace, while also joining forces with Zuko, and leading the Fire Nation into a new era of prosperity and good. Name someone else who is doing it like him. Oh, that's right. You can't. Woo! All right. Now that I've got that off my chest, I can finally breathe. How are we doing? Are we all still friends? No one's crying? No broken bones? No cabbage carts destroyed? Okay, good. Well, if we agreed, might I just say, you have excellent taste. If we didn't, let me know in the comments how you would have ranked them. Well, I'd love to sit here all day and rank the hundreds of avatars that were lost in time, but unfortunately, it looks like we're out of time for today. I hope you enjoyed the video, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye!